Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week of What It Takes to Be a Rock Star. I'm so excited you're here this week because this week I'm chatting with Charles Ellsworth, who is an incredibly talented singer, songwriter, musician who has been touring for forever and he has a ton of amazing stories. I think you're going to love them. And he actually also works for LCD Soundsystem, kind of like a jack of all trades. He does a ton of things, and that's how I met him because my band Gustav opened for LCD Soundsystem in December in New York, and we met him after the show. Actually, my bandmates met him first, and they found out that he had a podcast, and they were like, "Mel, you got to come over and talk to him. Talk to him. He's got a podcast too." So we ended up talking, and his podcast is awesome. It's called A Dirtbag's Guide to Life on the Road. It's pretty similar stuff. He also talks to musicians about their lives and yeah, life on the road, and it's really fun. And so I knew right away that I wanted him on the podcast because I knew he had some stories, and he totally does enough to fill a book or make a really cool movie. So anyway, yeah, quick look at his Spotify bio tells you a bit about him. He's from Arizona and he lives in New York now, but yeah, he grew up Mormon, and he learned guitar in the back of a furniture store, and then he ended up on tour, and we get into it. He ended up, moments, dark, deep moments on the road with like no money to his name, and then winning the lottery, like winning a jackpot, like all this stuff. It's incredible. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. And without further ado, here's Chuck, because his friends call him Chuck. Also, if you're not already, you can watch this podcast on YouTube. It's available as well as a bunch of the other episodes on there. I'll have it linked in the show description below. And also below is a link to a playlist that has all of the artists who have been on the show so far. And they all sound amazing. And you can actually put the music to the person. And the reason I don't put the music into the show is right now is because it's all like copyright stuff that I don't feel like dealing with. But you can listen to them on the Spotify playlist or look them up. I always link their websites too. So enjoy. I really like your story. I looked into all your things. All you have such a great story bio up on your Spotify that I'm most likely going to read to everyone before I have our
Oh,
conversation playing. Because it's
cool.
just, yeah, it's such a good, I just love how you laid it all out, or whoever wrote it. It's like the whole backstory. You came from Arizona, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and small town in the White Mountains, which is
that,
like northeast of Phoenix.
that's so cool. And you learned guitar in like the back of a furniture store.
Yeah, there was a guy teaching lessons. Gerber, yeah, there was like this furniture store that they also sold like some musical instruments out of, and a guy in like the back room taught lessons from there. And
That's cool.
yeah, yeah. What was funny is like years later, because I was like in sixth grade, and years later, my first like high school band. We realized all four of us had all taken guitar lessons from the same dude at the same music store, even though we hadn't really like known each other that well back then.
He was like the one guy giving
Yeah,
lessons, maybe.
and I had like gotten really into Led Zeppelin in sixth grade. That's like when I discovered like classic rock because I grew up on like country music and I got really into Led Zeppelin. And so this dude, Kent, would just like show me a Led Zeppelin song and like the lessons always just turned into him just shredding and me just with this shit-eating grin on my face like oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And he was just like this amazing guitar player who lived in LA for a long time and then ended up in my small town. And a few years ago, my buddy Mike, who was the guitarist in that band in high school, sent me a video of that guy playing in like a convention center in a hotel in a band, and they're playing Freebird, and the solo comes up, and Kent just like destroys the solo, and he's like in his 60s at this point, and I'm just like, oh
Oh,
my
cool.
God, he still shreds so hard. So yeah, that was my guitar lessons was like, hey, you want to learn this Tom Petty song? I'm like, yeah. And then it'd just be him like playing Tom Petty for 30 minutes.
I love that you loved that because I had the same experience, but I was like so annoyed at the guy because I'm like, I want to play, and he's just like, yeah, you just do this, and then it's like, and I was like, dang, this guy's just like playing this whole time, but he just kept yelling at me. He like would shred and then be like, use your pinky. One day you're gonna wish you had three pinkies.
It's it's such an ornery old like guitar teacher thing to say. It's like, yeah, it's very true. I do wish I had three pinkies for a lot of reasons, but but it's just such a funny thing to tell a kid that you're teaching guitar.
Yeah, yeah. He was like so crazy about it. And still to this day, I'm like, still don't use my pinky as much as I should. And I always just think about that guy and I'm like, he'd be so disappointed. He'd just be so sad. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the
Well,
pinky.
those it's so funny because I have so many fundamental issues with how I play guitar. Like it just because it's just punk rock, like and so like for years I've been like, oh, I'm gonna stop doing that thing. I'm gonna really train myself. And it's just like, no, I don't do that. And now I'm just years later and I still have the same bad habits.
But it's your
I'm
style now.
and then I'm just better at playing the guitar like it's a jackhammer.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I feel that way with drums too. I just have these really bad habits, but now it's like I'm not gonna change the bad habits in front of people now, like,
Yeah.
but I'm just gonna play with these bad habits. But anyway, that's really fun. I also got into Led Zeppelin like crazy too, and that was like the whole reason I really got into music. So I want to hear why you decided to like jump into music because a lot of people they like start a band and they do the thing and then they fall off eventually. But like what uh made you want to like pursue music? Because I know you do music pretty hard. So what happened?
What happened? I don't know if we have time for this. No. Um, uh, well, there's been a lot of different stages. I honestly never planned on being like music being the thing I pursued. I spent my life pursuing. It's a thing I've always loved, and I've always loved performing. And I grew up in a pretty musical family. We were Mormon, and like so my grandma taught us piano lessons, and we'd do like little recitals during Christmas time where the cousins would sing some songs for the family and stuff like that. And then like my folks got divorced and my dad went to prison and we kind of lost contact with that side of the family and stopped being Mormon. And that's around the time I discovered Led Zeppelin and punk rock and kind of started pushing against the grain. And yeah, it just was like always playing with friends in garages and whatnot. And in high school, we had like a thing where we would just like play like maybe every 3 months in someone's garage, like just as a thing to do on a Saturday. And I had a friend that I would snowboard with because there was a ski resort pretty close to where I grew up. And he lived in Phoenix and he hit me up and he's like, hey, my band wants to play a show in your town. Can you set something up for us? And I was like, I want to say 16 at the time or maybe 15. And I'm just like, there's nothing in this town. There's like bars that have music if you're 21. And so I ended up finding or talking to my principal and I threw a show in like the halls of the high school on like a Friday night. And we brought two bands from Phoenix and my band played. And so we had like a month to put together a set. And so we, kind of all the things we'd been working on, like jamming for a while. We just like put together a set and we put on that show and it ended up being like really successful because there was like a lot of it's there's all these like communities in the White Mountains that are all 15 to 25 minutes apart and there's not a lot to do for kids. Like we just hang out at Walmart and stuff. And so when we advertised at all the high schools, we had a lot of people come through and I remember my principal being like, hey, this is a cool thing. Like if everyone can be respectful, we could do this more often. And, if we don't have any problems and, we had to like hire a cop to like hang out there and we had to pay him like 20 bucks an hour, whatever the wage was. And there was like some fees that we had to cover. And then, but we ended up like paying the touring bands, I want to say like 300 to 400 bucks a piece or something like that. And this is in
Whoa.
2002, like my band, I think walked away with like 150 bucks,
Nice.
and it was like the first show I'd ever thrown. And we had a few hundred people there, like just in the halls because there's nothing to do. And so I ended up throwing shows through all of high school, and like my band would go down to Phoenix and play. This is like when MySpace started being a thing. I remember Lauren, my buddy from his band, or my buddy that had messaged me about the playing a show. Like we were messaging on like AOL Instant Messenger, like I remember those messages and being like, oh my God, like we got a show, like whoa, it was like this big deal. And then yeah, so I ended up like doing like a concert series, I guess. We just throw concerts and like bands from like Phoenix and Utah and Colorado and California would like find out about us on MySpace because there's all the people like touring in these small bands and whatnot. And they'd hear word of like, oh, the White Mountains, this scene where like kids buy a bunch of merch and like come out to shows. And so we ended up having a lot of cool bands come through, and through that I just kind of like met some people that ended up being like relatively successful over time. But I don't know, like sorry, that
This is awesome.
like
Keep
that
going.
band broke, or like we broke up when I was like a senior, and I started playing bass in another band where like there were these two guys from another band we would play with a bunch, that they had like a side project that was more like acoustic indie type stuff, because all of our bands were like screamo, hardcore, whatever, it was that Warped Tour scene. And so we started playing in that other band, and then ended up recruiting the drummer from my old band. Sorry, I'm struggling with talking right now.
Oh, it's okay.
And so this band that started as kind of like this side project ended up kind of becoming like a main thing by the time I graduated high school. And but I was older than the rest of them, so I graduated and moved to Salt Lake City. And during my freshman year, they kind of got a lot more serious about it and started trying to play more and like really taking it seriously. And they hit me up at the end of my freshman year of college, and we're like, "Hey, we're gonna go make a record in New York on Long Island," because they had met some guy on like MySpace or something, and we want you to play bass on it. Do you want to like join the band for the summer, and like we'll play shows and we'll go make this record? And so we
Sweet.
did, and we just had so much fun, and like making that record was really cool. And I remember we got a message from like the owner of Drive Through Records while we were in the studio, like, hey, we want to hear what you're making. Like send it to us first, and we were like all excited. Nothing happened from that. We were pretty small beans at that point, but it was just so exciting. It was my first time in New York City. We were recording on Long Island, and it ended up being like some guy just messaging a bunch of people on MySpace trying to get people to come record with him. And he had a decent studio and like had some credentials or whatnot. But like later on, I realized, oh, it just made way more sense to just make this record in Arizona at almost any studio. Like it,
Yeah.
but we were just like, oh, this is a big deal. It's New York, even though it's like some industrial part of Long Island. It's
Yeah,
not, but
yeah.
we're like
You
small
gotta
town kids.
do it.
We
Yeah.
don't know anything. Like we're just morons. And so but we had so much fun. We came into New York City for like a night, and that was my first time in like Times Square. And like there was so many of us, we couldn't get a cab to go to like the village. And so there was like a limo driver that was like had finished his shift and was just like, hey, if you want to ride in the limo, like each of you throw me 10 bucks and I'll take you to the village. And so we just like hop in this limo, and we pay like 50 bucks, and like there's like whiskey and vodka in there. We're just like drinking and whatnot. And I mean, just like had an amazing time. It was just like so cool. Like just stupid. And so then like that band, I had to go back to school in Salt Lake, and so the drummer moved to Salt Lake with me because the singer and the guitarist were moving to Durango, Colorado to go to school. And so we were like, okay, we'll meet up like in between. We'll play shows in Colorado and Utah and Arizona. And we kind of did that, but we were all so broke that like affording gas to do anything was impossible because like, me and the drummer were working at a call center with the dude from Max Payne and the Groovies, David, which is
No
crazy. Like
way.
I worked with David at a call center in Salt Lake City or North Salt Lake in like 2007 or 2008, something like that. Yeah,
That
dude, it's
blows my mind right
yeah,
now.
crazy. I've known that dude for a while now, and every time we see each other, it's just funny, like we worked at a call center together, like, and didn't even really
Whoa.
know each other until like years later when we both lived in New York City, and so um, but so this is like a long story, but yeah, that band we kind of like throughout that year we're just like, man, I really just want to give this a shot. Like I really want to just go for it. And I was like in school, it was like the early part of film school where they weren't letting us use any equipment or do anything. And I had already been making videos, like skate videos with my friends for years. So like school was kind of just a nuisance for me because I had to like work multiple jobs the whole time I was in school to like afford to do it. And like mostly like my mom just really wanted me to get my degree, and like looking back, it's like I don't fully regret it, but like it was kind of just a bunch of like expensive loopholes or like hoops to jump through that I kind of would have done things differently. And so when this opportunity arose, we were like, let's all move back home. We can like spend a year not having to pay rent, and we'll like buy a van, and we'll just do it. And we started working on an EP that um we're like we're gonna make this other record and we're gonna start touring and whatnot. And so that ended up we made a record with this guy Bob Hogue, who's a good friend of mine in Mesa, Arizona, and he's worked on a lot of my solo records now. But that was kind of like our rock and roll boot camp. We had done like a couple small West Coast tours, and then we got into Bob's studio, and it was kind of our first time dealing with like a pro, like a dude that was like, hey, you're spending a lot of money to be here. We're gonna make you an amazing record, but like we're not gonna fuck around. Like we're gonna like you need to show up prepared, you need to show up on time. Like our guitarist was just kind of like the type of dude that would just noodle through songs. Like he's like grown up a lot, and I'm so proud of who he is now, but being in a band with him back in the day, he was like the youngest stoner, just kind of like just not really attached to anything. And I was kind of like the type A like manager, like I was making things happen. So we like butted heads a lot, and now he's like one of my dearest friends. But like I remember Bob being like hearing when we were gonna record guitars, hearing what he was doing, and he's like, you're not just gonna noodle over these songs. Like I'm gonna print you what we have so far. You're gonna spend the next 2 days writing parts to these songs, and then we're gonna get back to this. Here, go do that.
Nice.
And then it was just like kind of like just all of us looking around being like, oh, it's not all just like free drinks and um like trying to be cool. Like there's a lot of hard work that goes into this, and you can't just ride on whatever small town talent you have, because just because you're like the one band that's played out of town in your small town doesn't mean you're good. And so it was just like a really formative experience for us, and for me especially. And like that record ended up like getting a fair amount of attention. I remember like Pure Volume was a thing back in the day, and like it was around the time Radiohead had done the Pay What You Want for In Rainbows. We were all trying to, like I say that the bottom's fallen out of the music industry during my career 3 different times, and I want to say this was like the first time. And like we were all kind of like, what is gonna happen? Because we all knew, like people were buying singles on iTunes, but we're like, what's the next thing with music? Like how are we gonna like we knew streaming was on the horizon, we just didn't know what it was yet. And
Yeah.
so Pure Volume was like we'll if you give your new record for free, give it away for free on our website for a week, we'll put you on the front page. And so we tested that out, and it ended up leading to us getting like 60,000 followers on MySpace or something like that. Or
Whoa.
by the time we broke up, we had like an insane number of followers on MySpace. And a lot of that was us just spending all of our free time just adding everyone, but like the pure volume thing like doubled the amount of fans we had on MySpace. And we did a couple more tours that we actually like. I remember our last tour, we came home and we actually had like $300 in the band fund. Like we had covered everything and we had money and we were so excited. And then the transmission in our van went out like
No.
after our last show in Phoenix, getting up the mountain to home. And that was like 3 grand to fix that. And then the singer, long story long, we had like a tour booked to go out to play South by Southwest, and then we were gonna do the Midwest. And if it went well, the band we were touring with, like their booking agent was gonna pick us up. And I had booked like all of our tours up until this point, and so like still like a booking agent is like the white whale,
Mhm.
like I've booked every show I've ever played pretty much. And it's still my like, oh my God, a booking agent would I feel like that would solve all my problems, even though it would not. But um, uh, but like a week or two before we were gonna head to South by, we were having a band meeting, and like the guitarist showed up with a letter from the singer saying like he quit, pretty much. Um,
What?
yeah, and it was like he was like, "Oh, this is feeling too much like a job, and I always wanted music to be fun." And and it's like this is like a rich kid who'd never had a job in his life, like we'd
Mhm.
be starving on tour or like cooking sausages in the parking lot of like a gas station on like a camp stove, and he'd like his parents would be putting money in his account so he could go to Subway, and
Oh.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
um, and so long story long, my solo career is just like kind of came out of spite for that guy.
Oh.
Cause like, he had written most of the songs. We had co-written some of them, but he would like have the song and bring it to us, and then we'd all flesh it out as a band. And it was kind of like an equal parts thing. And he started being like, I need more money because I write the songs. And and it just and like there was no money. Like, even though I like what was crazy is I remember because iTunes and ringtones were a thing, so like even after we broke up, we would still get royalty checks for like 500 to $1,000 a month for like a while, for like a
Whoa.
couple, for like 6 months, even after, because that record just like did pretty well, and people really liked it, and people were buying it and discovering it. And even after we broke up, people were like, "Oh man, I love this record. I can't believe you're not ever gonna play Ohio." And and um, and so, I was just kind of like really upset and mad at him because he was also one of my closest friends at the time, and it felt like a divorce in a way of like, uh, and it just kind of, it was like just a really tough time for me mentally, and I was like living at home, and I was like at a weird crossroads of like almost getting pretty addicted to like opiate painkillers and but also like be I've always been a really cautious person with like drugs and stuff like that, and so like also being like careful but still like it's so like and I just like the sorry, I don't know if I'm getting too into this, but like the
No,
dude that
it's
I would
great. I love
I
it.
would buy opiates from, one time I hit him up, and he was like, "Oh man, I'm in the Phoenix airport. I'm flying to the Virgin Islands and I'm never coming back." And it was like, what? And he's like, "Yeah, I've burned too many bridges. I'm out." That sort of thing. And it's almost like the best thing that happened to me in my young life was that like I no longer had like an easy access to, because this was a dude who would come on tour with us and like sell our merch and whatnot and play tambourine on some songs, but he had easy access to painkillers because he would trade them to like a vet friend of his that for like weed because like the vet friend, like the painkillers made him sick, but he couldn't get weed, because like it wasn't legal yet. And so, anyways, so yeah, that was kind of, it was just like this really dark, weird time where um, I was dealing with this band breaking up, figuring out what I wanted to do next, and then also realizing after I couldn't get drugs from this guy, like going through some mild withdrawals and realizing like, fuck, like what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like it was, and I'm like hiding this from my parents while I'm at their house and they're like, my younger siblings are still in high school, just like kind of had a real, it was just like a weird time. And I started writing my own songs at that point. And like I would only show them to like my brother and like my best friend, and and they were always like, the lyrics are awesome. I love your songwriting. I had a long way to go as far as learning how to sing and even play at the same time. And so, like um or around that same time, my sister was like, she hit me up. She was like, I'm studying abroad in Italy this summer, and I was gonna travel a little bit afterwards with a friend, but she had to back out because of whatever reason. Do you want to do that? You want to come to Europe and like backpack with me? And I was like, that sounds amazing. So,
Yeah.
um, so at that point, I kind of like pulled myself out of this like weird depression. It was just start working so I could save money to go on that trip. And I used to do landscaping where, I would just like rake people's yards or just find work that way, just whatever I could find. So I just remember like working every single day and just taking every job I could, and went to Europe and traveled with my sister that summer. And kind of like while I was out there, in a way kind of realized like music is what I like. I need to be traveling and making art and doing that. Like that's like the best I've ever felt is when I'm just like on tour with my friends and playing music and just like seeing different things and just living an exciting life. And so yeah, and then like around that same time, a friend of mine who had like introduced me to, it was like my friend's older brother who showed me every cool band I had ever heard, pretty much. He's just been like such like a formative person in my life. Preston, he introduced me to the book The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño, and because I had told him, I was like, I don't know what I want to do, man. I just want to like travel and play, and like I want to dedicate my life to making art. And he was like, "Oh, you should read The Savage Detectives." And then so I did, and it was like game changer for me. Like that book meant so much to me and kind of just sent me on this path that I've been on ever since, where it was like, okay, I'm gonna finish school because mom really wants me to, and like, what the fuck else am I gonna do? But like, I'm just gonna keep writing songs and see what happens. And then I moved back to Salt Lake, and a little bit after that, I met my good friend Carson Wolf, uh, who plays under the name Vincent Draper. Um, he he and a friend, I got invited to like a barbecue, and like his band at the time was doing acoustic set around like a fire while we're after during that barbecue or whatever. And it was kind of like folk Americana type stuff, and I had started getting back into like old Johnny Cash and discovering Townes Van Zandt and like Emmylou Harris and like Dolly Parton. When I was growing up, Dolly Parton was a punchline, and then I started realizing like, holy shit, Dolly Parton's the most amazing person that's ever existed.
Yes, I
And
agree.
and so like, and that kind of really informed my songwriting, and I talked to him that day and was just like, hey, I write songs. Like I'm kind of just kind of explained my situation, and he was like, dude, let's hang out. And so we did, and showed him some of my songs, and that turned into like, met my good friend Ty through him because he played keyboards in their band and he had a studio. So I recorded an EP with him and recorded, years later, my first full length with him. And they were kind of my introduction to like the Salt Lake music scene, and they had me like open one of their shows. That was like my first solo show. Um and yeah, that just kind of like while I was finishing school, I was just like, okay, how do I get on tour once I'm done with this? And that's yeah. And it's crazy because I'm like that sounds like so much, and then I'm like, oh, and then that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like I still it's maybe not
It's a
15,
loaded
but
question, I know, but I love long stories, so I love it. That's why I made my
yeah.
podcast long.
No, that's I always when people like t tell long stories on my podcast, I'm like, that's what this format's for.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
I love listening to like a 2 or 3 hour podcast like while I'm driving or I'll put it down and come back to it. It's so that's why my podcast can be crazy long because I'm like, yeah, just
Hmm.
let's just bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't like hang out with anyone very much besides my dog, so it's like it's nice to talk to people.
Yeah. No, yeah. No, take it away. I love it. I love that your whole story is like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of musicians find that choose to go on with music in their life. They have that pivotal point in their life where like
Hmm.
music kind of saves them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's like now I'm at a point where I like look back on a lot of the stuff I wrote, especially early on, and like I want to say like my early part of my career is like um oh man, what's the word? It's like it was I mean, I was using all my songwriting for therapy, like before I ever went to therapy. It was, you know, my first full-length record, a lot of that's about, this person I had broken up with, or that she had broken up with me, but then also like it was also really influenced by this person who I had been in love with for years, but like lived in Norway. And so, and like I was just home and had to get a bunch of my old stuff out of my folks' place because they're like getting rid of the storage unit and downsizing and whatnot. And I'm going through like letters from this person from Norway when I was like 18 to
Oh.
21 and just like oh wow this is where a lot of like she was my muse for a lot of those early records and it's just like I was just dealing with a lot of like childhood trauma and stuff through writing and it came out in like sad bastard um songs and
Hmm.
um I don't know. I think honestly, I think it's like when you're younger, you have or like I was always like, and I feel like I still do this, but I'm always like really searching for like role models or especially like male role models and so like when I was younger, I would always I attached to people or like Townes Van Zandt, who's like one of my favorite songwriters. And I'm sure was probably a fucking nightmare to like go on tour with or like to be, you know what I mean? I'm sure like obviously like just a problematic person. I don't know about like maybe not problematic in a cancelable way, but maybe, but also just like like had just had some real demons and stuff. And like I used to romanticize that a lot. And I didn't think I would live past the age of 30. I just wasn't planning on it. And but it was also like this balance of like I I don't give a fuck, but also like really scared and like, well, I don't want to OD because my mom would be really upset about that. You know what I mean? And so like there's like that voice that was kind of keeping me in check a little bit. And then as I've gotten older, like trying to get better at like um understanding the parts of like someone or a lifestyle that you're romanticizing and trying to be more realistic about those parts while um like trying to trying to write songs that say more than just like I'm sad because someone broke my heart or because she left or because like trying to say something more about like the broader picture and like the collapsing empire that we are inside of and late stage capitalism and all the results of just awful shit that's been happening for hundreds of years
Yeah.
so I don't know. So like that's kind of where it's evolved for me. Post college, Oh shit, I kind of skipped a part. Or my best friend and I, Tyler, he and I have been like best friends since like seventh or eighth grade. We, played football together in high school. We both played the same position on offense and defense. So like football practice was just hanging out with my best friend for 3 hours every day after school. And and like in my small town, there wasn't a ton to do, and like football was something that like we were known for, and something I grew up wanting to do, and like really caring about a lot. And then dealing with the, oh, this is my whole identity, and then football being over and being like, oh, what am I now, and like and then also now looking back on like, oh, what were the good things that I learned from that, but what were also the toxic, not great things about, you say you were a high school football player, and a lot of people in the Brooklyn music scene are like not stoked on high school football players, you know what I mean? So it's like, but also, like being proud of the parts of that. They're like, yeah, we were really good. I was really good at what I did, and I worked really hard, and we won state, like that's cool. But also
Sweet.
like now being like, yeah, but there was also, it doesn't matter. And also there was a lot of additional toxic bullshit that I had to like navigate just because of the nature of what that is.
Hmm.
And then trying to like divorce myself from the parts of that that I don't like. Like I didn't listen to like heavy music for a long time, like any type of heavy music for a long time, because it felt like it fed into like my anger and my toxic like maleness or whatever, or like like that part of me that I was trying to like not play into too much, and now like I love listening to heavy music, but I feel like for a lot of my 20s it was much more like acoustic based, like let's try and let's try and chill out a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a big story that you
Yeah.
have. But I know there's got to be like years and years and years of more stuff that happened, but I don't know. It when you said that you just wanted to get back out on tour, like how did you end up doing that? How did you end up doing your first tour? Was it off that first show that you did and you just decided to keep on going, or how did it happen?
um After college, oh yeah, that. Oh, so I brought up my best friend. That was what I was getting into. So like the first tour I did after college, I got offered a gig in San Francisco at like this, like there was like a wine company. I don't think they exist anymore, but they were called like House Band Wines, and there was like this vintners market in San Francisco, and they were having a stage there, and they wanted me to come out and play, and I didn't have a car, and so there was this other songwriter I was friends with, and I knew he had a Prius, and I was like, "Hey, can my buddy come and play?" And I sent them his music, and they were like, "Yeah, he's great. Have him come." And so like I was like, "Hey, can we tour out to, like you want to do a West Coast tour?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And so
Nice.
so I booked what I could as far as a West Coast tour back then, and the day we went to leave on that tour, I realized he invited two other people to come to play as his band, and we're in a Prius with gear. So there's
Oh,
four of us.
oh boy.
Like we ended up like leaving my guitar behind because he had an acoustic guitar. So like I would just play his acoustic guitar. And it was kind of like this, like that whole trip, it was maybe like a 10-day trip, but it was kind of like oh, you're not, this is different than touring with like your dudes you've known for years and you've been in a band with for years. Like you don't
Hmm.
know these people, and you don't know what kind of dumb decisions they're going to make, like inviting a band to come along in a Prius. And it was like really eye-opening, that whole tour. And like I was kind of miserable, and like by the end of it hated all three of those people. Like they were just like very self-centered, very just like just young, and like I remember there was a bar we were supposed to play in Southern California, and the two guys that he had brought weren't 21. So they weren't allowed to come in until like right before we played. They could play, and then they had to break down and leave. And I remember them being like pissed off about that and being like, like we're the band, like we're, just like this kind of like, and I'm just like, like we're, they want us to come like bring our talents, like, and I'm just, it was just like this thing of like, dude, you fucking don't understand how this is, like how this works. And um yeah, that, and so that was like a just a rough experience. And so I was like, I don't want to do that again. And and like my best friend and I had talked about hiking the Continental Divide Trail after we graduated college, and we had, that was our plan. It's like we're gonna graduate college and then we're gonna spend a year working to save money so we could do that. And so he was in school in Oregon. He moved to Salt Lake, and in with me and my buddy Vincent Draper, or no, they got an apartment together, and I just lived on their couch in the living room for
Nice.
like a while. And so Tyler and I started trying to save money, and then just like not being able to make any money and not being able to save anything. And so a few months before we were going to leave on this hike, we realized like we don't have any money saved, and we can't hike across the country without gear and without anything. And yeah, I mean really we just partied way too hard and spent all of our money partying, and that's why we didn't have any money saved. But you learn those things as you get older. And so what I kind of talked to him was like, um, we had a buddy that had gone to prison when we were younger, and he had gotten out. And like what he did after he had saved some money is he just road tripped around the country and went to all the 48 lower states and just found work as he was making his way. And so we were like, oh, we should do that. And so we kind of pivoted, and it was like, okay, we're gonna do that. I'll try and book some shows because I just put out my first like full length record, and we'll just try and do the lower 48 states. We both had grown up working construction and doing all kinds, we just have all kinds of skills. So we'll just like, oh, if we need to find work, we'll do that. And so ended up finding a van for like $600 on,
Ooh.
not on Craigslist, but the Utah equivalent, KSL, anyone who's listening. And
KSL.
yeah, yeah, that's where I got my dog.
What? No way.
Yeah.
That's
It's the gift
hilarious.
that keeps on giving. Um, uh, but so yeah, found this van for like $600 from this like retired like Navy mechanic who had like just taken insane care of this van, had like a log book of every oil change he had ever done, and like,
Love that.
and um, he was asking 800, and I remember being like, this is what we're doing with it. We have 600. Like, would you take that? And he was like, yeah, because of what you're doing, yes, I'll do that. He's like, but if I see this on sale on KSL for $1,000 next week, I'm going to be really upset. Like he thought that we were just fleecing him, and it's like, no, that's not what happened. We ended up driving that van around the country, and lived out of it for like 6 months. And yeah, it was that. I feel like I need to write a book about that trip because it was just like insane. Like we maybe left with $500 in our pockets, and we were out of money pretty quick. And um, on the West Coast, I had some contacts, so I had booked some shows that kind of helped fund the West Coast part of the trip. But we had to get to Galveston, Texas for a friend's wedding, and like pretty much we barely made it to Galveston in time for the wedding. I remember we're just like emptying like change from the ashtray into like toll booths places just because we just
Oh.
like weren't even gonna be able to make it anywhere. We woke up in Montana one morning with just no money, like just both of our bank accounts empty. We were smoking Rolly cigarettes at the time, and we like had no money for cigarettes, so we just like re-rolled like the butts of our old
Oh
cigarette.
man.
It was like kind of probably one of the lowest points I've been as far as like broke on the road. I remember we posted up at a gas station, and I used to do this with my old band, and when CDs were a lot more prevalent, I would just like post up at a gas station, and just go up to people like, "Hey, would you put $10 in my gas tank for a CD, or $5 or whatever?" And like usually. either you'd get kicked out of the gas station pretty quick, or sometimes people would be like, yeah, here's 20, like, and people would be like, well, what's your story? That's cool, and then you ended up making friends that way that would like come to my shows years later that just met me at a gas station and because they helped me get gas in my tank. And so yeah, we used to do that. And from Galveston, we just partied super hard. This is like our high school friend got married as our first high school friend, and it was just insane. Like we all just partied so hard for like 3 days, and then they're all like flying out back home to their lives and their jobs, and we're just like, okay, where are we
No.
going?
Now
Like,
what?
what do we do now?
This great big goal of getting to Texas, and then you got there and you're like,
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so that was. I mean, we went to like a bar in Houston because they had an open mic, and so I was just gonna play that open mic, and it ended up being kind of like a jam session with a bunch of older players, and like one of the dudes he was playing, and I asked, I was like, could you play a Towns Van Zandt song? And he was like, yeah, sure. And then he played Tecumseh Valley, and it was beautiful. And then like I remember his name was Rick, and you could just tell he was just like this older guy that you're like, this guy shreds guitar now, but he's like in his 70s. So like I'm sure 20 years ago, 50 years ago, he shredded guitar. And he ended up being like, "Oh yeah, you like Towns? But when I was really young, he used to come through town and ask me to play guitar for him once in a while." And and I get to sit in, and it was really cool. And then after the shows, he'd always kind of send me back home because they were probably going off to get in to do heroin or whatnot, and he was kind of looking after me like, "Okay, kid, get out of here," type thing. But I remember he said, so I never got super close with Towns, but he always called me amigo, which I always really liked. And I and I was like, it was just like this moment of like we were had no idea what we were doing. We're lost, no money, but then just like this, like this non-player character that like kind of helps get you to your, just like gives you that strength you need to like keep going in a way, or like it's like I don't know. And so the bartender from that bar ended up like hearing our story and was like, "Oh, I know someone who needs something done." So we called him up, and we ended up working for that guy. And then we made it to Austin, and we're, I mean, there's a whole story in Austin where we framed houses, worked on a framing crew for like 3 days with like three of the worst human beings I've ever been around
no.
on the planet. Like, yeah, they were like the worst, and ended up working like three um super long days in like the August heat in Austin, and these guys didn't know what they were doing, and they ended up getting fired from this job, and then we never got paid. And like my
No.
buddy ended up like getting heat stroke, and it was like
Oh,
wild. And so sorry, this story, like, it just, like I said, I need to write a book about this
you
trip because it
do,
was
or
it was like
movie or something.
it was insane. Like we ended up going to Chicago at some point. There's a lot in between, but I'll skip ahead because his Tyler's girlfriend at the time was going to be in Chicago, so he wanted to see her, and so we made our way there. And this is also the summer of 2012 when gas prices were like $4.50 a gallon. Like like that
Oh.
summer where they just peaked, it was super high, and our van got like 10 miles of the gallon. So it was like we were just fucked,
Yeah.
like it was just rough. And like after a few days in Chicago, like he was staying with his girlfriend at her friend's place, and I'm just sleeping in the van. And after a few days, he was like, uh, but like I gotta, I'm sorry, but I gotta bail. Like I bought a train ticket. I'm going back to Arizona. Like I can't do this anymore. Like like I can't do this anymore. And it like we had gotten like bed bugs in the van. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh.
Just like we had to bug bomb the van and just like leave it for like a day, like it shit like that. It was like rough, like gnarly. And so when he like bailed, I like knew. I was like, yeah, dude, go for it. I get it. Like I had shows booked in Chicago, or no, in Boston and New York City. And so and they were like a month and a half out, so it was just like, um, and I didn't want to cancel him, so he left, and I just ended up continuing on the trip. And I kept trying to do the 48 states kind of out of spite for him. But so like I left Chicago and I drove into Wisconsin, drank a spotted cow beer in Wisconsin because all around the country people have been like, when you're in Wisconsin, you got to drink a spotted cow. So I had like one spotted cow, drove back through Illinois to Michigan just to hit Michigan, went into the like state line there, and there was like a casino, and I had $10. So I was like, okay, either um like I had enough gas to get to my sister's place in Cincinnati. So like I had like 10, or no, I had $20. So I was like, okay, I could spend $10 on dinner and then I have $10 for tomorrow. Or I could put this $20 in a slot machine and see if I can win myself dinner plus some gas money. And so I put in a slot machine and I ended up winning like 150 bucks.
Woo!
Yeah,
Oh my
and this is
gosh.
all the day that my buddy had left. So I'm like I had driven to Wisconsin, back through Chicago traffic up to Michigan. It was just stupid, stupid. And
Oh.
but I win that 150 bucks, bought myself like a steak dinner, and then drove to not Gary, Indiana, where Notre Dame is. What's the name of that town? I forget.
I don't know.
And just like watched college football on a Saturday and like got drunk on that money that I that I saved and like passed out in my van. Um, and then so yeah, so long story, lots of long stories. Ended up going to Chicago or Boston and New York to play those shows because they were like the Boston show was like a paid gig, and so it wasn't really enough to make sense to continue for a month and a half. But I was like, I'm gonna do this, and so yeah, I ended up doing that and like went to New York, played my first couple of shows here in New York, and this was during. Was this during CM? No, it wasn't during CMJ. No, I just ended up like having a lot of friends that lived here and just like did really well. Played at like the living room and like they all brought a lot of friends and just had like an amazing show that night, and um had just a phenomenal time in New York. I almost didn't leave. Like this girl that I knew from Salt Lake who had moved here was just like, you should just stay. Like all your stuff's in your van. You're already here. You should just stay. And I was like terrified of the thought of living in New York City, so I did not stay. And and I made my way back to Utah, and then oh my God, sorry, I got so many long stories.
It's okay. It's good. I
I
like them.
made my way back to Utah, and then shortly after I got back, I ran into this guy Trace, who his band had played my going away show for this trip, and he and I like we had played a few shows together, and we didn't really know each other well, but we had this ritual of like before the show like smoking a joint in his van because it like I think the first time we played together he's like, I'm gonna go spark this joint, you want to join? And I was like, yeah. And so like every time we played a show together, we just smoke a joint in his van before the show. And I ran into him when I got back from Salt Lake, like a week or two later, and he was like, "Dude, how was that trip? How was everything?" Like he was all excited. I'm kind of like worn down, and he was like, "Let's go on tour." Like my band broke up. I'm doing solo stuff now. Like let's go on tour. And so I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we met like that week and kind of planned out a routing, and we planned this like 7 week tour like that went all around the country, and yeah, and just like a few months later hopped in his van with his dog and um set out, and we did not know each other very well at all, like, and I remember driving to Idaho for our first gig, and we're both just like, he's like, Trace was, I remember him being like, you know, like the only reason I know that this is gonna work out is because you said yes to it. He's like, because you're the type of person that's like gonna say, fuck it, let's go. And he's like, and that's how I am. And so that's how I know that like, even though we don't know each other very well, like this is gonna be fine.
If you want to know that everything is going to be fine, get yourself some sorry cables. The best cables that the solar system has to offer. They're colorful, they're quality, they're amazing. I use them to record this podcast. I use them when I play guitar. I use them when I sing. They're amazing. They've never failed me. I love the cables. It's small business in LA. So check them out at sorrycables.com. Thank you, Sorry Cables, for sponsoring today's episode.
And he and I, for the next 2 years, just did 3 or 4 of those tours where we'd be on the road for like 6 to 8 weeks, just all around the country, and playing anything we could get, everything, and like a lot of downtime. A lot of our touring, so like, and this is like the early days of Instagram, so there's probably all these old shitty photos at the beginning of my Instagram of like we would just spend our days off in like the most beautiful places, like in the redwoods. I have all these favorite places around the country now that I know to go to when I'm in the area, because he and I would just like, oh well, we don't have a show from Monday to Thursday. We got to be in this place on Thursday, so this is what's in between. Let's go camping and drop acid in the redwoods, or like, and so we just did that for like on and off for like 2 years, and it was amazing. It was so cool. Like Trace is he's like we've kind of fallen out of touch. He kind of grew up and like went to grad school, and now, has like a job and like a house and a family, and all that stuff, makes more money than I probably ever will. But he was just like those 2 years on the road with Trace, I don't know, it was just fucking magic. Just so cool. Like, because every little thing that happened was just a positive. Like, I remember we played the Cave in Chapel Hill. It was my first time playing there, and it was probably like a Wednesday night, and we had the crowd really liked what we were playing, but nobody was there to hear us play. Nobody knew who the fuck we were. And but there was a decent enough people there, and Trooper, his dog, like we were getting to howl along with us in the set sometimes, and in that cave it just sounded like really cool. And I remember we got paid in tips, and like we each got like an 18 pack of Pabst. And
Nice.
so like we were just like riding so high after that show, we just sat in the van and just drank most of those beers, and then passed out in the van in the parking lot. And I remember like it being just like the coolest fucking night ever. Just because we got a bunch of free beer and like people dug our songs, and that was what a lot of those tours were, where if I've never been super good about being consistent with like an email list, and like being the person that builds the brand that is like what, I don't know, I'm just, but like if I feel like if I had been, those years would have been a really good time to like garner a lot of those longtime fans. And some of the people that still support me are people I met on those tours, but we were kind of out there just sowing wild oats and just being knuckleheads. So, it was like amazing and so much fun, but also I'm like, damn, I probably could have done a better job of like advancing my career during that time.
Yeah, hindsight 2020. Yeah, I know. I was laughing because I checked out some of your videos on YouTube, and one of them was like, "Hey, I'm Chuck. You might know me from this, or seeing me like 10 years ago in a random bar, and now you're seeing like a video
Yeah.
uploaded 10 years later, and you're like, oh, it's that guy."
Yeah.
And I thought that
That's
was funny.
that's precisely yeah, I've got so many friends around the country and around the world at this point that are just people that like, their ear perked up when I sang a certain lyric in some random bar, and then they decided to come up and talk to me, and then now, we're friends, and so that's, I don't know, it's cool. It's a like that book, The Savage Detectives, there's like I don't want to get too long into it, but at some point Roberto Bolaño like had a manifesto, because they like he and his best friend had started this poetry movement in Mexico City, and like he says this thing about how like the poet should leave the coffee houses and the bars and take to the road like the American cowboy. And um like live a life worth writing about. And like that spoke to me so much when I read that at age 21. And I just reread that book earlier this last year because with LCD we went to Mexico City, and it's been on top of my list of places I wanted to travel my whole life, and I got to go there. And so I was reading that book when we went there, and I stayed for like a week after and explored the city. And like I had so much gratitude during that trip for that book and for like my this life that I've lived, you know. It's like for like the fact that I've not really taken the easy path, um even when there were easier paths. It was like that, um like I look back now and like my life I've got such a cool, interesting life that I never would have imagined that this would be what I'd be doing. And it all just stems from like kind of reading that book when I was 21 and being like, yeah, I guess if I got to be on this planet for however many years, I should do it like doing what I love. And like, and not, I'd watch my stepdad work a job that he hated forever and then get laid off before he could retire, and like,
Mm.
and just get fucked over. And he and my mom did everything right, like the way you're supposed to do it. And they just got fucked over because they're working class. And like, it's like, yeah, this world doesn't exist to make your life easy if you're working class. And so I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna give 30 years to some fucking company. Like, I'm gonna go live a life. And yeah, and it's like, yeah, my body is probably a little more aged than had I been able to go to the doctor and stuff. But, even my friends with jobs can't go to the doctor. So,
I know. I know.
so yeah, that's I'm like, oh, and I still have the 10 years I've lived in New York. I'm like, is this even interesting at this
I know
point?
it is. Now I want to touch on something that like the whole touring the way that you toured. Um that's a really, really special way to tour that not a lot of musicians even get the chance to tour. Like a lot of people that are listening might not know there's like different styles of touring. You
Uh-huh.
know, there's the DIY book the basement show tour. There's the get in the van and figure it out as you go tour. And then there's like a little more legit, you like email the venues and you get like, instead of like going through bands, you just like show up at bars and like play for the, built-in, two-person crowd
Hmm.
that's in the venue. Or there's like the booking agent tours where you have a show every single day and you have to load in at 3 p.m. But like that whole like get in the van, figure it out tour. I've never done that exactly. I've done the more like DIY like tour, and then when I travel it was more of like that magic travel thing. But like it is so cool to have that experience, to have just like those days open, and like it's so weird the coincidences and the synchronicities that happen when you're just open to the world, and then all of a sudden you meet like this guitar player who played with one of your heroes like out of
Yeah.
nowhere. And like I've had friends who just like took off, went on a road trip, and then like met their heroes. And it's just like, I don't know. I think like the universe is listening to that. Like when you just throw yourself out there, and even though it's really, really hard, and you have all these, you know, $0 days, like I've been there too. Like me and my one friend, we hopped in a car, we didn't know each other, and we both had $15 to our name, and we went on the road and didn't tell each other until the end of the thing when we each got $100, and I see her put it into her bank account, and it says $115. I was like, you too. And we're just like, I can't believe we made it. We like survived, you know? So I think it's just like really special that you had that, because I think it really builds something different in people. It's like you're scrappy, but you like really appreciate everything like
Yeah.
in life. Like someone gives you a piece of bread, you're like,
Yeah.
thank you. Like it's
Yeah.
the best thing. Someone gives you $1 for your music. It is like amazing. And then, then there's like, yeah, sleeping at a place, getting the $600 van. Like it's so, it all just like, it are these little puzzle pieces to this like beautiful life that even though some of the pieces are really hard, it's like you could look back and be like, whoa, how the heck did all of that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's no, I it's funny because I like on that first tour with Trace, I remember I had a because I've always been good about merch. Like that's always been the way because I realized that at a young age with my first band and then the first band that I toured with was like, oh, if we have dope merch and if people like if there's people in the room and we can put on a show and we have dope merch, people will buy it. And you can always buy a shirt, buy them in bulk for $10 a piece or like whatever it costs to get them printed and resell them for 20. Like there's good profit margin there. Like, and so on that tour, I had a shirt that was just like the US and it said, buy a van, hit the road, figure shit out.
nice.
And like that just, it didn't even have my name on it. And that people would see that and like, oh my God, like that's what I want to do. I'm going to do that next summer, and they'd buy that shirt. Um, and that really spoke to people, and when people kind of realized like, oh, that's what we were doing, that it's funny because like as I get older, like I got the gray hairs and I'm like closer to 40 now, and it's like it's harder to, well, you can't, I mean, not that I still do that kind of, but I not really that because I have like I book shows because I have contacts, but it's like it's less cute, like you're like the old guy. It's not just like some kids hopping in a van figuring shit out. It's like, oh, this is your life, and
Hmm.
some people see it and they're like, dude, this is your life? That's amazing. Like you got a dog and you have a van and you drive around and you play shows and you go hiking on your days off, and like some people think it's amazing, and other people are like, like those Tinder dates don't go as well. The people that don't find it exciting, or they're like, but what
Yeah.
about your savings? Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, like yeah, I was gonna ask like how nowadays when you're touring, like how if that's how you do it, if you're just like super set with your contacts and then like yeah, I can totally relate. I feel like you pass this age where you're just like no turning back. Like
Yeah.
you and you're like for better or for worse, like I made the decision and I'm here now, so this is my bed that I'm going to live in. And a lot of people they are like, wow, so cool. And then you're like coming home like, I think that's cool. I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
You're like you're like, I had a
If
great time, but like how many great times can you have in a life too?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I find myself trying to go to my friends' shows and stuff like that, and sometimes like my ex-girlfriend would get upset because we'd be at shows and I'd just be anxious because I feel like I'm at work,
Yeah.
because like I've been going to at least 100 shows a year for 20 years at this point, or you know what I mean, like it's
Hmm.
maybe not 20 years, but like it's crazy when you're like, oh, the amount of bands that I've seen play in my life is like insane, is insane. And
Hmm.
like sometimes it can be hard for me, or like I have to constantly remind myself like this is what you love, like this, you know what I mean, like appreciate what's happening, not just the like it's like, yeah, this is just another band at a show that you're at, but it's this band. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
there's two ways. It's like what's the music that they're making right now instead of like, oh, I'm just at another show. Like, and I feel like I've gotten better at like actually as I've gotten older, like really becoming fans of a band in a moment, even if I've never heard of them, because I force myself to like be here, enjoy, like what are they doing? What do you like? What do you not like? Instead of just like this anxious like, oh, do I have to load in, like what do I, you know what I mean, even though it's not my show. But sorry, to answer your question, the like when I tour now, it's like last year I did a deliberate slow down on playing shows. I had just started like this full-time job with LCD before I was freelance, and so like I kind of wanted to make sure I left enough space in my life to make sure I could figure out what this job would look like and what my and like make sure I could do a good job, and so I did a lot of flyaway shows this past year. I did one van tour. My buddy Carl and I do a songwriter we used to do a monthly songwriter night here, and it's kind of turned into like a touring thing called the Highway Hootenanny. And so we did a tour from like all the way to the top of Maine down to the tip of Florida, the Keys, and then up to like Nashville and back. And so that was really fun. But this year, sorry, I'm putting out a new record this year, and so I'm trying to start touring again as much as I can, and so I'm like a little like I don't know, I'm a little worried because I feel like I took a year from not doing it, and so I'm like, oh, are my contacts still there? Can I still do this? And I really think it's just like I'm in my head. I just need to send emails and it'll work out. And so like now it's just see like I know the routings that I usually like to take, the places I like to play. I do the best in like the Intermountain West and the West, which kind of sucks because I live in New York City. And so like right now I'm booking some album release shows in like Utah, Arizona, Montana and stuff. And so I'm figuring out whether I will tour out to those shows or if I'm just gonna like deadhead it and then start playing and then figuring out if I'll have a band, if there'll be New York players or people in Utah or, because usually I've kind of the whole time I've lived in New York, I've t still toured as much as I could. And I think that's part of why I don't have like a very strong fan base here in New York City because like existing in a scene and like I'm just like I don't know. I get inside my head too much, and like being on the road makes sense to me. So like trying to like grow in the city I live in is like hard for me. Um, so I'm kind of figuring out what it'll be like. Since I moved to New York 10 years ago, it's been like I've got this drummer here and then a bass player that I know in Utah that'll just like hold it down. Like I just know I can trust him that like he shows up and like my buddy Kevin, he actually lives in Ohio now, but for a long time I just knew I could like, hey Kevin, these are the shows, this is what we're playing, these are the covers, if we're doing any 3 hour sets, these are these sets, and he shows up like pretty much ready to go. We do a couple rehearsals and we're good. And so I've always had kind of plug and play people. And this year I'm kind of figuring out what that is. I had a band based in New York for my last record, 2021, when we could start touring again. I bought a van and we did one of those long like 7 week tours with Jared. He plays in Certain Death now. I don't know if you know Jared. He was in Grandpa Jack.
Sounds familiar. I don't know.
But
I
yeah,
just feel like I
he's
say no anytime anyone asks me if I know about something.
yeah, I mean, Jared's the best. He's one of my favorite bass players and humans in the world. And then this guy Blake was playing drums. So we did the power trio thing and toured, like I said, 7 weeks in the van. That was the first tour post COVID, and it was really fun because Blake had never been west of the Mississippi, and like we got to go to Yellowstone and the redwoods and kind of take our time on the days off to see stuff. And then we did a couple more tours where it was much more like we did the West Coast and back in 3 weeks. Like we did 20 shows in 21 days, and Jared and I kind of like that more because like, well, if I'm out here, I want to be playing. And if your band lives in New York City, it's hard to make enough money on the road for them to be able to afford their bills in New York City.
Mhm.
So packing more shows in made that easier. And so for this album cycle, I'm still figuring that out, like what it's going to look like. But it's usually just, there's a lot. I play a lot of breweries, places
Cool.
that like will pay you for 2 or 3 hours of music. And
Cool.
at this point, I've gotten to where I can fill most of 3 hours with my own songs. I like to throw covers in there because like I enjoy it, but I'm very rarely playing covers that people are asking for. Like
That
it's
takes some
always
rare
like
thing.
here's like this obscure song from a person whose name I won't say because he got canceled, but I like playing this song, so I'm gonna play it. Like or stuff like that. So yeah, like I this last year with a lot of the flyaway shows, I was trying to do much more of like sell tickets, like, I'm flying into town, this is the night I'm playing, please come out. And I'm still trying to figure that out because like I've never been a sell tickets act, it's always been like playing house shows, coffee shops, breweries, bars, venues, like I've and and as you get older, your friends that used to come to shows have kids and responsibilities, so it's hard for them to come out. And so, like I'm trying to it's just like a weird time to like, you fly all the way to a place to play a show and then like before you get on stage, you get all the sorry, I'm not going to make it texts and you're like,
My kid got sick. My kid's puking.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I get a lot some of those. Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Do you your brewery shows? Do they cover the cost of like if you pay your band or something, or do your tours in general cover their own costs, or do you have to pay out of like money you make with your other job?
Usually, um, I'm able to cover like I've gotten good at booking and planning and spreadsheets. I make the joke that the entire music industry is just held together by nerds with spreadsheets.
It's true.
Because it's true. Like even at the highest level, like when I work with LCD, like their managers are using spreadsheets. Like we're all just nerds that love music that like now do different things in music. But usually I've gotten to the point like the brewery shows and stuff like that. Usually, they'll pay, you know, 200 to 400 bucks depending on, and that's why I like playing Montana and Wyoming and Colorado because like those states people pay well for music. Like it's playing a brewery show for 3 hours, but like a lot of times they'll offer you 400 or 500 bucks, and so if you can pack enough of those into a weekend and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're playing the shows that might be like tips or a percentage of the bar or whatever it is. Like usually I try and find like anchor shows. Like I know, oh, this spot in Utah I usually make X amount of dollars. I know in Phoenix I do this well, in my hometown I do this well. And so then I'll kind of budget it all out and figure it out. And then usually, like with the band in the past, like the first tour I did with them, I was like, I'll pay you like a sliding scale based on what the guarantee is for the night.
Hmm.
So like I'll guarantee you X amount of dollars. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like, you know, you get 60 bucks for showing up and playing. But if this gig pays 350 or more, you get 80 bucks or you know what I mean? And so like just trying to make it to where it's like, and so at the end of the week, when I pay you, that's what it's based off. And we split all tips, and so that's what we did for the first tour. And that worked, but we had all those days off that, kind of, when you're on tour and if you're not playing, you're spending money. And so, we kind of renegotiated stuff where they were like, we need to make X amount a week so I can cover my bills. And I was able to cover those costs, but it got to a point with those guys where it was just like, I I'm not making any money. I'm not, and I'm booking the shows, I'm ordering the merch, I'm tour dad. I'm doing everything. You're showing up and setting up your gear and plugging in. I mean, half the time with that drummer, I was carrying his drums, like
Mm.
it's so, you know what I mean? You just kind of hit a point where it's like, yeah, you guys are asking for more money and like I get it, your bills are expensive, but there's just no more money. There just
Hmm.
isn't more money. So what am I so I don't know what to do, And so that's kind of where part of why I slowed down on playing with a band and with those guys because it was just like I just can't afford this. And if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. 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 Exactly. That's very common right now. I feel like musicians are just staying home if they can't if they don't have another, four jobs that they can like blow all their money to hire all the people on tour. But yeah, it's such a shame though, It's just like such a shame because you do all that work and then you're out there like busting your ass and then it's like yeah, just not being able to like make it work. Like or just being able to just make it work, but yeah, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, that's the songwriter, the band leader that is like making $0, which is
Hmm.
just yeah, just so unfortunate because they're usually the ones whose like whole life is consumed by it, but they're like the main employer.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's the weird thing about music industry is like is the people that are creating everything and that are like making the work possible aren't making any money, and like it's like, and there's tons of people in the music world that are making a fuckload of money. Like there's tons of people making a lot of money in music, but unfortunately it's not the musicians, and that's just where we're at right now. And I don't know what to do about that. That was, like 10 years ago, had I gotten offered a job like the one I have with LCD now, um where it'd been like, hey, you get a steady paycheck, but you can't go on tour as much. 10 years ago, I'd have been like, fuck off. Like I don't want that. You know what I mean? Like if I wanted to get a steady paycheck, I'd have been a continued to be a film editor out of college, I probably
mhm,
would be making a lot more money now. And so, but now it's like having that consistent income and the opportunities to, like, I went on a bus tour with them in Europe last year, and it's the first time I've been on a bus tour. I've been touring since I was 19. I'm 37 now, and it was my first time on a bus. And like, they weren't very nice buses because it was a short tour, and like a lot of the older crew members were like not having a great time, like because
aw.
they've been doing it for a long time, and they've been
Yeah.
on all kinds of tours and whatnot. And me, I'm just like, holy shit, I'm on a bus in Europe right now. This is amazing. I'm like losing my mind. I'm just having so much fun. Um, and that's what I love about the DIY world I've come from is like you said earlier, like I just appreciate certain things so much more. And I think that when I first started working for LCD, and why, like, because like I bartended for years. I didn't even work in music. I just bartended, and then, but I knew I could, like, I had these jobs that it's like, hey, I'm leaving for 3 months, and they'd be like, okay, see you when you get back. Or I had a bunch of bars that I just picked up shifts at because they knew I could show up, I could make cocktails, like that I was good. I cleaned up and I got out of there. You know what I mean? And so there was a few bars where I was like on the payroll for years, even though I didn't have a set shift. I would just be like, "Hey, I'm back in town. Anyone needs shifts covered? Let me know." And and then post pandemic, I got fired from my last bar job like a few weeks before COVID hit, and then COVID shut that bar down, and it ended up working out really well for me. S- but um, but I kind of, like, at that point was like done. I had quit drinking for a while, and was just like, I need to get out of bartending. Like I hated it. I know people that like the service industry. Since the first day I worked in it, I hated it. Like it's just a means to an end for me. I don't give a fuck about cocktails or wine or, you know, it's so like post COVID, I started getting opportunities to work for bands, like real bands, and like guitar teching, or, I bought that van just like, oh my God, I don't know if I can afford this. And then it ended up being the smartest thing I ever did, because like bands find out like, oh, you have a van, we need to move gear, or a tour manager's like, can you pick this band up from the airport and take them to their hotel? And so it's all led into me just like working in the music industry a ton the past few years. And I think part of why people like hiring me and they keep asking me, and part of why I ended up getting a full-time position with LCD, is because of all those years DIY where I do everything. And so
Mhm.
you work for a band like LCD when it's like, oh, this is a 30-person crew, counting the band, I think. Some it's 25 to 30 people that we travel with. And I'm
Wow.
like, I've been on band tours where I brought a lighting setup, and I was the only one that knew how to set up all the lights. So like, not only am I like tour manager, booking agent, I'm lighting director, or like lighting tech. I'm setting up all the lights and do it. You just like insane amounts of work. And it was really validating to start working for bands with like an actual budget and being like, oh, I've been doing the job of 20 people for years.
Yeah.
And so every time I feel bad about like not doing a great job with the email list, or whatever it is, like, it's like, dude, you're doing fine. Like you're doing fine.
Yeah, and I do want musicians who listen to this podcast, like, I think one thing I've been trying to get across is that, like, it's good to recognize that within yourself. Like if you're doing it all alone, like you are a manager, you are a social media manager, you are a marketer, you are
Yeah.
the sound person, you are the guitar tech, you are, it's like there's bands that have positions for every single one of these things. And, I just want people to like actually realize that they're building skills, and those skills are valuable even though they might be doing it for 20 years not getting paid. Like it is a legit thing
Yeah,
that they are
totally.
doing, you know.
Yeah, and they transfer a lot. I think a lot of us weirdos get into music um because it's a place for weirdos, like but it can kind of be insular in a way where you don't realize that a lot of the skills that you have from figuring out how to make music happen, whether it's throwing shows or any of that stuff, that translates to so many other things. And then you start to realize, like, oh, all your friends that have had like real jobs for years, like, not to take anything away from those, but it's like they're responsible for a few things within this scope of this company. This is what they do. And like, and they just show up every day and they do these things, whereas we're doing these things, and like, sorry for the audio listeners, it's like there's a narrow scope. I'm like doing hand motions
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh, this is a podcast.
I always
Uh,
forget that too.
but it's I think, like, I mean, all about class solidarity and, like, uh not to take anything away from working people, but I do think like DIY musicians just do way more work than most corporate jobs would ever ask of you. Like, it just takes way more hours, it just takes so much more of you than like a job would ever ask. And and I do find myself as I get older at times being like, dang, there's a lot of people making a lot more money with a lot less knowledge and skills in some of these departments than I have, because because they went a different path.
Yeah.
And like as you get older, you kind of like, oh, is it time to, like, I understand all my friends that have sold out, quote unquote, you know what I mean, that have like slowly fallen off and stopped playing music and just started working a job, because like consistency is like such a blessing for someone who's never had it.
Hmm. Do you ever have those friends be like, you gotta keep going though. You gotta keep going, because I have that in my life where they're like, yeah, I know your life is all crazy, but like you're like the one guy they know that's like left
That's
doing
still
this
doing it.
crazy thing, and they're like, you gotta just for us, like just keep going, and you're like, I'm dying, and they're like, just keep going. I don't know
I
if you've had
I
that.
I have I definitely have those people. I have it's like interesting, like, to have I have a lot of cheerleaders, and like the only way I've been able to do what I've done for as long as I have is because there's a lot of people that have just been big supporters since day one. Bought every t-shirt I've ever put out, and like, have a closet full of Charles Ellsworth t-shirts, and stuff like that. And it's not like, when I say a lot, it's not like, you could fit all those people into a mid-sized venue in Brooklyn, you know what I mean, into TVI probably, but those people have been consistent for me throughout the years, and like a lot of them, um, our old friends that I went to film school with, that have gone on different paths, or that I used to play in punk bands with, that are doing different things, and they're always like really supportive and encouraging, um, and like, and my folks have always been kind of like, I don't understand any of this at all. We never knew anybody who made a living doing art, like, we didn't know anybody who did that, like, my parents don't understand it, but they've always been like, you're going to do your thing regardless, you know. So they support, but it is funny as you get older, the amount of people that, like, 10 years ago, if I was like, I don't know, maybe I should just fucking do something else. And they're like, no, man, you're good. Like, you're doing some cool stuff. Like, people that would like be encouraging. And like now it's like, it's not everyone, but there are more people that are like, yeah, maybe maybe you should do something else, you know? Or when I started making consistent money working for other bands, people are like, "Oh, maybe you should be doing this," you know? And as much as I love that, like, um, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't do a bus tour with a band or a crew that I didn't like as much as LCD. You know, that was one thing. Like, I had a blast on that tour, but I also realized very quickly, like, oh, if I didn't love all of these people and if this wasn't such a great crew of people, this would get miserable fast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like at that point, it's like I don't know if I'm gonna take those jobs. Like, I I'd rather do something else than be miserable on practically a submarine with people I don't like. Y-
That's true. It is like a submarine.
um, but you know, I think we're just at a weird point in music though, where like you know, the monetary value of music has been just shredded so much at this point that that it's just like we're all feeling the squeeze, and like everybody that isn't making, I don't know, $250,000 or more a year right now in America is feeling the squeeze. You know, it's just the reality of the times we're in. Um, and I've always been able to like find a way to pay my rent, you know, like whether it's swinging a hammer or pouring drinks or playing guitar. And so I kind of just remind myself of that, of like everybody's struggling right now. You live a life that is that you've fully chosen yourself, you know. Like I that's sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in this place in New York City, you know, because I've got this job that I like and a cheap apartment, but I've got roommates and I live next to a noisy street, you know. I want to get out of here, but then you're like, but also this is a life you couldn't have even dreamed of when you were in college. You know, it may not, like I was on the this is a humble, maybe a humble brag, I don't know. I got to go see the Blood Brothers in at Warsaw a few weeks ago, and they were like a band that in high school and college I saw every time they came to town. I loved that band. Would just lose my mind in the mosh pit every time they'd come to town. And so seeing them on that anniversary show was really cool, and a friend was able to get me on the guest list. And so and my buddy that I brought, I remember talking to him afterwards because we left and we're just like riding high. And I was like, what's crazy? It never in my wildest dreams when I was seeing this band in high school did I think I would be seeing them in New York City and be on the guest list. Like never in my wildest dreams. But also never in my wildest dreams would I be like 37 years old and have three roommates. So like so you got to take like the good, the bad, and the weird with your wildest dreams, because that's how that's what that means. You know, it's not all like, you know, perfect, amazing stuff. But it's like I don't know, but I am a very lucky person to do what I do.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. That was one of my questions: is if you felt like you were lucky, or if you felt like you just worked consistently over the years, and then now you are where you are. Because a lot of people they say that when you go on tour. Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. And you're like thinking about the 4 months of emails that you did and the,
Yeah.
throwing away any consistency in your life to do it, throwing away your house, throwing away, like everything. And not having, I know you get to bring your dog on tour, but like I've no pets, like I don't have pets, like all this stuff. And then everyone's like, you're just so lucky. You're like, okay. Like, so I was gonna ask if you felt lucky or if you just felt like it was the result of just years of you being consistent, you know?
Um, I mean, I think it depends on the day you're talking to me, or like you know, the scenario. But I think it's definitely like a mixture, because like I deal with, I think we all do, but I deal with imposter syndrome a lot, and especially when I started working for LCD. You know, my first time working a festival as the guitar tech in Mexico City, and like in front of like 50,000 people. You know, you're just like, what the fuck? If everything goes wrong, what the fuck? You know, and it's like, am I? should I be here right now? You know what I mean?
Like
I
me?
and so like with those jobs or just being like there's times where I'm like the imposter syndrome will make me feel very lucky and or make me worried and I remember talking to my friend Tobin, who's actually my downstairs neighbor, and that's how I started working with LCD, because he works as the synth tech, and so like it started as we just needed an extra body to help our drum tech move stuff because he had like surgery, so he couldn't lift anything, and so I just came in and just was like help them pack up gear while um, Marty told me where things went. And I was wearing a hot water music sweater and Marty's like, dude, I got a hot water music tattoo. And like Mike, the production manager, is like, oh, they're like my friends. I've been on tour with them before. And they were like one of my favorite bands growing up, like one of the punk bands I discovered in junior high that like is why I'm here right now. And so that kind of led to them just hiring me more and more for things because I think sometimes being a good hang is so much more important than being like the best guitar tech. You know what I mean? Like obviously you want to be both, but like being a good hang on a submarine is way more important. Like a lot of people can put strings on a guitar, you know, but are you like an insufferable asshole? Um, like because that's an important part of it. And so all this to say, like, there's times where I'm like the imposter syndrome, where I feel really lucky, and I'm like, Tobin, thank you so much for like introducing me to this world of music that I knew existed, but I never had entrance into because I was always just like trying to force my way up through the bottom of, I'm just gonna play dive bars forever, and someday someone's gonna notice. I don't know what my plan was. Um, and Tobin will be like, yeah, but like the reason why you hit the ground running in this world and you've done so well is because of all the years of work you've done leading up to it. And like tour managers have told me, like, I very quickly know someone who's just been thrown into this industry and doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, or someone who like has done the DIY thing. Like it's apparent. I've had multiple tour managers say that, where it's like it becomes apparent that like, oh, you've done this with no money, so now doing it with a budget, it's like having money is just lubrication. It just makes things go easier, and
Hmm.
um so to answer your question, I feel very lucky because of all the things that have helped me just keep going, whether it's people buying t-shirts or putting $10 in my gas tank. Like I feel really lucky in that regard. But I also am the first to acknowledge like I've been working hard at this for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it's and sometimes it makes me be like, do I want to keep working at this? But but I don't know, just like acknowledging like it is hard work and um but I think there's also like people with any sort of success, it does require some amount of luck or somebody. You need like a kingmaker, someone who's sees that potential and like helps take you to the next level or give you another opportunity.
Hmm. Yeah. It's really well put. Yeah. The good hang thing is huge. It really
Yeah.
is. Like I know even with like Gustav, like I'm not definitely not the best drummer in the world at all, but like said yes to go on tour. I'm down to practice. I can leave whenever I need to and I'll be nice to you, you know? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
and that's what I think, really helps in music specifically when you're on tour with people. You're stuck together 24 hours a day. It's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such a big part. I remember uh Dave, I want to say Dave Hood, Patterson Hood from the Drive By Truckers' dad was
Hmm.
like played bass on a ton of those Muscle Shoals records in like the
Oh,
70s.
cool.
And just like a legendary bass player that just like he was like, I showed up on time and my gear always worked. Like I wasn't the best bass player that lived in the area, but like I kept getting calls because I showed up on time and my gear worked. And I knew the
That's
songs
huge.
when it was time to show up, like, and it's like sometimes that's what it takes, because, like playing guitar is what I'm discovering after years and years and years of playing is I've always made playing guitar much more complicated in my head than it actually is. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not that complicated once you like put patterns and things like that together. It took me a long time to get there, but now
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I've just been overcomplicating this for so long. Like playing guitar is not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard. Like you give anybody 6 months, they can be a pretty decent guitar player if they put the time in. But everything else, like writing a song, you can't that's where it gets hard, being in
Mm-hmm.
a van with smelly people that are driving you nuts because you're hangry and you don't have money for food. That's hard. Playing guitar is the easy part. Getting on
Mm-hmm.
stage and playing, like that's like all the other shit is what you get paid for if you're getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
Getting on stage and playing is like, dude, that's my favorite shit
It's
ever.
like
It's like the
time
best.
off.
Everyone's looking at me. It's fucking
Yeah.
sweet. Except for the days where it's like, shit, everybody's looking at me. I
Yeah,
don't like
yeah.
this.
Just eyeballs. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, no, turn around, close your eyes.
Usually there's no more than like 8 eyeballs total when I'm playing. So two of those belong to the bartender.
Those are the scariest ones. The less eyeballs, the more scary when there's two eyeballs in front of you. That's terrifying.
Yeah,
Especially
no, that
like your
that
moms
really
or
can be.
something. you know. But anyway, this was an amazing conversation. The sun is telling me it's time that I
Yeah,
should
I
get out of this chair.
like the
But
stylization of your lighting right now.
thank you. Yeah, it's very cool.
um,
But
oh, sorry.
no, just thank you so much. This was super fun. And everyone, you gotta check out Chuck's calling you Chuck because your friends call you Chuck. And I feel like now
Yeah,
we're friends.
yeah, of course.
You gotta check out Chuck's podcast called Dirtbag's Guide to Life on the Road, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, should be having new episodes sometime soon.
Yeah,
Well,
but if not, there's like a million old awesome episodes too.
that's true. That's yeah. A lot of people haven't discovered it yet because we don't get a lot of listens. So there's a lot of new episodes there for you people. um, yeah, I've got a new record coming out in April, and I just put out a new single called "Avenue of the Giants" last week. So
Sweet. Yeah, everyone go
yeah,
check it out.
yeah. Thank you for having me. Sorry if I rambled too much about random stuff, but
No, it was awesome. I loved it because honestly, it builds the whole foundation of exactly showing like all these things that you did that led you to where you are now and everything that you're doing. It's just like I love that. I love hearing
yeah,
where people come from. So it was
cool. Same.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to have you on my podcast so I can ask you all these questions.
Okay.
So
And I'll ramble because I
yeah,
I do that.
no, I would
I
love
will
that
go.
because
Okay.
I love sitting back and listening while someone rambles, especially about like a life in music. Like
Yeah.
it's so cool.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we'll chat soon.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
We'll
Bye,
see you.
Chuck.
Bye.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Please let me know what you're thinking. And you can make a comment or let me know if you've enjoyed this podcast. Please hit subscribe because it helps a lot. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me at whaittakes-to-be-a-rockstar@gmail.com. And tune in next week for another awesome episode.